I'm so pumped up with all of the great like swag bags and also a bunch of the like, new technology that's just been announced. And there are some new stuff that I'm also going to bring you with also the updates of the existing stuff as well. So I will get started right away. I'm Michael Yanchiho from the Azure Core AI product team, and I manage all of the kind of the overall product strategy for our PaaS portfolio and also our migration tooling. So I think a lot of you might have actually seen a lot of the kind of bumpy roads when you're migrating or you're modernizing your applications from the traditional application to a cloud-based AI-ready app. There's a lot of the things to take into consideration, including some configuration changes that you have to make it right so that you will be able to be cloud ready. There's a bunch of the monolith application that you have to sort of decouple them. You have a bunch of the existing limited performance capabilities or even like security and privacy concerns of the things that you're using that's embedded in the code that you're writing. So there is quite a lot of the things to actually consider. And then before that, you can actually move into be like AI ready or to be like in the cloud. And what we typically see customers are doing is they start by assessing the application. And that's going to be the most important thing. It's kind of like the first step that you will be doing. And that's also the tool that we will be introducing shortly, which we have made an announcement last year. But then there's quite a lot of enhancements that we have done with the AI and also all of the technology that we have embedded. So starting from assessing your applications, you will want to find issues, you want to plan resources, you will want to do the code change, and then eventually you'll want to test before you actually go deployment, right? That's kind of like a very typical way of like how a software development lifecycle would look like. Now, the whole thing could be so much easier if there's some tool that can actually help you with this, right? So that's exactly why we developed the tool that's called Application and Code Assessment Tools, in short, AppCAT. And we'll go into that. Before that, I want to just talk about what's the benefit of like modernizing your .NET application further. Basically, you wanted to leverage like the capabilities that we have on Azure, right? You wanted to get the native support, you wanted to get the full offerings, you wanted to get all of the cool goodies, and even the direct supportability with like SQL Server, with Windows Server, with IIS, with a bunch of the Microsoft first-party capabilities. And you want to use the tools that you're already familiar with. So everything that we build is around the tooling, like Visual Studio, like Visual Studio Code, and also GitHub Copilot. So everything is all integrated with one IDE that doesn't really, need you to go away or go somewhere else to be able to actually do the work. And then you have all of the integration with like GitHub, ADO that you're familiar with. So you can stage and you can pipe everything within your DevOps pipeline and then just get everything going fairly easily. And you got also like, cost performance benefits. You got like protections from your application with like built-in services like firewall, gateway, or even Defender for Cloud. You also got GitHub advanced security features that you can then embed them into. So all these are the benefits of what you wanted to do. And we're the only cloud that actually provides all these like fully managed services and also fully end-to-end experiences from code to cloud and also from cloud to optimize to AI that actually gives you all of these benefits altogether. So like what we have mentioned earlier on, we build a kind of portfolio of different tooling across everything. Like you have all of the different tools starting from your portfolio assessment with if you're IT. So typically your IT will start from like, Azure Migrate or the third-party tool like, Dr. Migrate or the other ones to also go through like how everything is basically going from discovery, assessment, and then eventually for the migration, we made it super easy for you to do a one-click deployment directly to, for example, VMs. And for those ones who wanted to leverage all of the above mentioned, benefits and also the kind of the capabilities that we offer you, we also built App Service Migration Assistant that helps you move your .NET websites directly or ASP.NET sites directly from your on-premises to Azure with a very good looking GUI that you can actually get things rolling very easily. And also works very well with your IIS manager. So you can detect, you can look at the application, you can see how everything is working. Let me just show you real quick how that actually looks like. So everyone's very familiar with this. This is the IIS manager. I have my dev shop site right here running. And that's kind of a very, very simple management portal right here that everybody's already familiar with. The App Service Migration Assistant makes it super simple. You can choose like wherever the application is, and then you can choose your application that's already running. In this case, it's on my machine. You can do some of the simple things to check on the applications itself. And then most of the things are going successfully. There's only the configuration that might need to change. You can do that later, or the tool could actually help you mitigate that. And then you copy, open the browser, you then connect to your subscription, and then you can get the migration hub going, you got the option going, and then you will get your connection right there. So it's fairly simple. Basically open up a quick screen to just want you to paste the code. Let me just put it over here so you will be able to see where you copy paste those codes directly in here, like what we have next. And then it'll basically allow to access the specific application to say, okay, I want to log into my account and using App Service Migration Assistant. And then now it's running, and then it'll just basically pass through and then ask you to get your passcode again to just make sure that you are you, so that it's very secure. And then it'll ask you again, are you trying to sign in to App Service Migration Assistant? You can say continue, then everything will be right up there. You have already signed in. And then you can create a migration project to assign to each one of your specific migration hub. And then you can look at the subscription that you wanted to do. You can create something new. You can then just name your destination, and then you can hit migrate. And then all of the application is already migrated to Azure. That's how simple it is. Now, with that, we also give you additional capabilities like what we have introduced about a year ago of the code and app assessment capabilities for .NET and Java, which is called Azure Migrate Application and Code Assessment Tool. That tool gives you all of the details that I will also show you some demos of, like what are the enhancements that we've been making, and also what are the things that is actually enhanced with GitHub Copilot now. So that with the AI capability, you can make it super easy for any developers in your team to be able to understand what needs to be done and also what are the things that we need to do. Okay, let's move on to the specific things of the application and code assessment tool. Now, what is this tool? So many of you might be already familiar with it. This is a tool that gives you the ability to look at your static source code and also compiled binaries and configurations locally in your local machine. So it does not require any sort of internet connection necessarily. As long as you have the latest Visual Studio and also you have the tool, you will be able to run the code assessment and also all of the capabilities that we were talking about to be able to give you those different story points and also give you those issues that it identifies, and then all of the things that it needs to be changed. And what it does is it identifies all of the source code issues that will be potentially an issue for you if you don't change them before you move on to Azure. So that helps you sort of mitigate everything before you actually do the actual code change and the migration. And finally, we made it super simple to integrate that with GitHub Copilot so that you have the contextual feedback, you have the contextual experience of what are the projects that you're currently working with, what is the things that you wanted to change, and also what are the issues that it identifies. And then it gives you the specific recommendations and the next steps to expedite the whole process when you're trying to apply for the specific code changes and also the remediation. And what it does on the issues identified is that it captures all of the different source code connection strings or source code services that it uses, or all of the source code issues. For example, pop, like for example, you're using a database connection strings that might be a SQL Server. You might be having some Windows auth that is dated. You need to change it to like Azure auth for Azure ready. There are some file systems that might be running underneath that you might need to update to some Azure specific services. There are some networking specific configurations that you might want to also update. There are some embedded identity somewhere, or even secrets that you might be hard coded in that you're not aware of, because those might be legacy code, right? It detects all of these for you, and then it recommends what are the things that needs to be done, and also what are the things that needs to be figured out afterwards. And when should you consider starting the whole thing? Well, we typically recommend you to start from the get-go. So when you really wanted to identify what are the applications that's ready for going in the planning, in the IDA kind of the state, you might want to use AppCAT right away so that you can start by assessing your source code, assessing your applications, and to understand what are the dependencies, how much time do I need to plan, how much resources do I need to prepare, and then how much of those issues that you can then prioritize on how to mitigate each of them. And using the capabilities that we enabled with GitHub Copilot Chat, that to help you, plan, understand the resourcing, understand how much of the time and also how much of the capability that's needed on your team to be able to get it done, or follow through like all of the different steps that it recommends and the services that it recommends to be able to then help you mitigate those code before you actually upgrade or before you actually move to Azure. And finally, the App Service Migration Assistant helps you move that entire application directly to App Service so that the deployment and everything could be done right there in the shipping kind of a stage. So just to give you an idea of like how that is. And like what we have mentioned, AppCAT runs offline. So there's no user code that's transferred to Microsoft. We collect very minimal telemetry just to understand if the system is working or the system is not working, and that's all. And it helps you scan for potential security concerns and also anything that's wrong in your source code. For example, you might be having some issues with the specific application that somebody might be hard-coded something into your application with their secrets or with their passwords. You want to mitigate that, right? So that's something that it also captures. And then finally, GitHub Copilot helps you basically run everything and also get everything going. So with that, let me just jump right away to the demo so that you will see how that's going. So I'm in my Visual Studio 2022. The first thing that you need to do is to open Pop-up Extension Manager and type in AppCAT. And in this case, I've already installed, but in the case that you haven't, please install that. Then you will be able to use all of the capabilities that we're mentioning here. And for also the GitHub Copilot, you will need to have GitHub Copilot to sign in as well. In this case, I've already signed in. So you want to sign in and also want to make it open so that you will be able to use the capabilities that we'll be introducing shortly. Now, moving to the projects that we're doing, MVC Music Store. Every one of you should be very familiar with this application, which is written many, many years ago. And we kind of revitalize it to just showcase that what is the ability that AppCAT is able to do to be able to actually capture all of those dependencies before you actually move on to Azure. So once you install everything, once you have like GitHub Copilot enabled, it's super, super simple. Right click on your project, and then you can see, the upgrade that you saw yesterday, right? Like that's something that you will want to do, like for upgrading to a newer version of .NET. And in this case, for the AppCAT, you can just say replatform to Azure and click it. Voila. You got the report creation UI. And the UI here basically asks you to say, hey, I want to run a new report, or I wanted to open an existing report. In this case, I wanted to run a new report. And because MVC Music Store is a .NET MVC 5 application that runs specifically on the ASP.NET kind of a scenario, and I wanted to run it on App Service. You can also point that to some other services like Container Apps or even Kubernetes service for your application to run. For example, you wanted to assess your container with all of the configurations and all of that, or you wanted to just specifically full-blown AKS. That's also something that you could do. But in this case, I'm going to choose App Service Windows to make it super simple, because then I can just push my application right away over there. Now I click next, it'll ask you what other project you wanted to look at. So you wanted to choose the entire project, or if in some cases you might have multiple different projects, you might want to select them. But we recommend you to select a few so that you can focus on specific projects that you wanted to do the code remediation and also the updates for. And then you click next. In this case, you have two options. One is to scan the source code and settings. So that includes everything in your code. That includes, all of those specific like C#, Visual Basic, or even like ASP.NET specific stuff. And that might be specifically the web config files or the app settings. In some cases, if you're running the specific files in there, that those are the applications and the source codes that actually scan and also look at everything that is in there and making sure that it's working properly, and then give you those like issues and also the specific story points. And binary, many of you might also wanted to look at like binary dependencies. There might be specific binaries that you might wanted to check to make sure that everything is working proper. You might be having some loose DLLs. You might be running some specific like open source NuGet files. You might be also looking at something that .NET Framework is, you're not using like .NET Framework. That might be some like global assembly or some DOL specific files in that case, so that you can then look at the specific like environmental settings to make sure that everything that you have is all under control, and then you can then move to the right place. In this case, I'm not going to run that because it's going to give me a lot more things to look at, but I'm just going to show you like what it will look like in the source code specific areas. And I click Analyze. Now, typically, because this is a small project, so it runs super fast, like just 1-2 seconds, it's done. In the larger kind of projects, it might be taking up to like 1 or 2 minutes that we see, like some of those customers that we helped in the past, it runs somewhere around like 1 minute all the way to like 3 minutes. That might be a huge, large file that's right there. So just so that varies so that you know. And once it's run, it gives you these compatibility report to basically tell you how compatible your application is to the Azure destination that you have chosen. So in this case, you see all these different labels, all the dashboards, projects, and aggregated issues with all the different panels. So in here, many of you, if you're already using this, you're familiar with, right? Like you have the mandatory things. That means you gotta change. Like those are the things that you have to change so that to make it runnable or to make it operable in Azure. There are optional stuff that's basically telling you, you can change it. They're not like blocking issues, but we recommend you to change. There might be some like, specific configuration or the kind of, key vault kind of a stuff that we will recommend you to use in opposed to be using some traditional auth kind of mechanisms and whatnot. So that would make it run smoother, faster, and also safer. There are some potential things, that's the things as kind of like more of a common or like common things that you wanted to just look at that will not impact your migration, but it'll basically help you make things easier and also run like more safer, faster, and also more optimized. And finally, there might be some informational stuff that are specifically just for your information, and that might be something that's right there. And we now aggregated all of the different categories. In the past, you are seeing a lot more story points. We denoise them so that it's a lot easier for you to focus on the most important things to actually change and not like all of the swaps of everything, because a legacy or traditional application might have a lot of things that you wanted to change. But in this case, we made it super simple so that it's less kind of story points, is also categorized into what are the things that you might want to look into. There are security issues, there are scale issues, there are identity issues, database connection, or some other stuff that you might be detecting. We also added Copilot Chat right over here so that you can then look at, what are the steps of this specific project and also what are the things that you wanted to do. So we'll do that right after. Now, this is the project that you're having, and then all these are the issues I actually detect. So this is the mandatory issue that you have the Windows authentication. You might want it to change to something else so that it'll run smoothly on Azure. There are then some of the other like potential things, just like what I mentioned, right? Like there's the connection strings, there's the database connection strings that it has detected, and you might want it to do something about it. And then there's also the static content that is optional, right? You don't want to have static content to be baked in. You want everything to be having specific dynamic rendering so that it saves the space and also making your site loads faster so that it doesn't really load that much of the stuff that might potentially be having like some performance issues and challenges. And also some security things like it detects of, there's like, some configuration builders detected that you might want it to change the key to something else. And you might want it to use some service to mitigate them. Or even there's like hard-coded sensitivity data that's detected, like what I've mentioned before, right? Like there are some passwords right here that you might want it to change to something else. Now, what we have added to all these cool capability is the Copilot Chat and make it super, super neat to get everything going very fast. So I can just click on Open Chat and say, hey, help me start migrating my solution to Azure. And Copilot will start like basically looking at your context of your project, looking across like everything that you have, and also to see what are the code, what are the resources that it's using, and then how you can actually transform them into something that's actionable, and then making it very, very straightforward of like how are the stuff that's right there. In this case, it detects a lot of the different stuff. There's like the database connection strings, there's the static file, there's sensitivity data, there's the logging mechanism. So those things are the things that it detects within the project that I just mentioned, right? So I can ask Copilot, say, how much do I need? How long would it take me to all these? So that it gives you those contextual recommendations based on the complexity of the project and also based on the application itself that it actually has the context of, to really kind of thinking about, okay, this might be how much of the efforts that I might be needed, aside from like kind of the starting point of like, hey, everything that we've just mentioned, right? Like initially you have to do everything on your own. If you're an expert, you know where to fix. Just go right ahead and then to find that specific line of code and the aggregated issue, and then you can then see, the specific stuff in the specific source code right there that it detects, to then be like changing directly. But then in some of the other cases, if you have a large team or if you have a lot of the different applications you wanted to assign to a lot of the different people to then get things to work on, then the easiest thing is to then just get the Copilot to help you with. So there is something right here that to estimate the resource, the timeline for your migration, we need to address each issue by the step. Let's start by the database migration. Then it'll just basically tell you, okay, these are the things. I have the database. How do I do? And then I can just click, and then it'll generate like one by one by one by one. So with all of the specific issues right there of like everything that it needs to be done. And for each of the specific item, Copilot can generate the specific things. For example, if you already assess your database, or if you haven't assessed your database, you will have been prompted the different results. And it based upon like everything that's right here in your source code. So all of those context is taken into Copilot, and then Copilot is then generating all these specific things. So in the case of like, if you have already get the application, then what you need to do is to do like, the backpack file to migrate to Azure SQL, and then to get everything going. And I can say, okay, I have this or I don't have this. So that's super simple right there. And in the case of the source code that needs to be changed, for example, in this case, I'm looking at this like web config file that I wanted to actually do something about, right? Like I wanted to, generate something to mitigate it. I can also do the same thing and say, ask Copilot, help me resolve this issue. And Copilot immediately tells me, okay, this is a mandatory thing. So here's what you need to do. First of all, you wanted to, replace it with the Azure authentication. You wanted to enable, AD. You wanted to get the connection string updated. It also, populates the specific line of code for you to actually copy right there. And then finally, you wanted to test it. And then there's additional information for you to understand like why managed identities is important for this specific purposes. In the case, I have this code snippet that's already been created, even though I don't have like all of the details yet, but it helps me create like what needs to be also augmented in my code. And I can say, okay, preview. And what it does is then it takes you to your web config file, to that specific line of code, and then to say, okay, the code it generates is right here. And then you can then just say yay or nay. And then you can also ask Copilot for the specific workspace that you're having. For example, there's some like Azure credentials, or there's some like specific developer credentials you wanted to combine with, so that you can create more accurate things. Like for example, in this case, it's like connection string, your server name, and with the contextual kind of understanding of your Azure workspace, you will be able to then get everything more aligned into that, like your server name to be changed directly to your right place. And you can say accept, then the code is right there. You can say nay, I wanted to ask more questions, or I wanted to change more, then you can change that afterwards. And you can, of course, get this as a templatized thing to start with, and then to change all of those like details, like for example, the ID, the passwords, and all of that stuff to be in there, and then to then change all of those like specifically. So that gives you like the specific steps of like how you can change those managed identity and also the SQL authentication. You can also do the same to this, and it'll add to that specific line of code, and it'll add to that specific line in the areas that actually works for that specific purposes. So that's how easy it is to make all of your changes across like line by line, code by code, and also the specific stuff. I can also check on my database connection string files of this specific thing. I can ask that question, and it also tells you like what is the things that you need to do, and also what are the like other considerations that you might want to have, and also the tools that helps you really to move everything into the right place. And since this is market's potential, you don't have to do anything necessarily to actually make the change happen. That's how easy and also how fast that it actually detects and also changes your specific issues into actionable insights and also into something that you can completely mitigate. And with that, you can also export all the reports. So if you like, you're a solution architect of your application, or you're the application manager, you can then say, okay, I want to have a report on HTML, or I want to have a JSON report, or if I wanted to have some sort of a spreadsheet to track on all of the issues. The cool thing there is that, okay, if you have already changed this, and then you can say this is resolved, and then you save the state. Then when you come back to export the specific report into HTML, it'll actually carry those different states. And you can then get all of those specific application that is actually based on the state that you're having. And in this case, I will save just to wherever I want it to do. And you can then open up the specific report in the browser, and the browser will look like this, which is exactly the same thing as like, what are the kind of the mandatory changes, what are the kind of the potential things, and also the additional optional stuff. And when you click to each of the individual stuff, you can see like all of these, that's right there. And what's cool about it is with the state, if you change them in Visual Studio, you mark that as changed, this will also show as resolved in the state. So it actually carries over in your report so that you know what else you need to plan the resources for, and also how to actually get everything going. Now, it doesn't just end right here. With everything that you have done, you have changed all of your code, you have updated all of your stuff, then you can say also, ask Copilot, can you help me some cases of this app for my migration to app service. So what's really cool is that you can then also have like GitHub Copilot Chat to help you based on the context of your application to then generate some test case so that you can see like, what are the steps that's needed? For example, what do you need to test on the database connection, right? Because you changed some of the code right there with the database connection strings. For the validation of the specific configuration and the app settings value, and also all of the different usernames and also user passwords, you can also get like the authentication and also all of the different things that it recommends right here. And then the performance testing of like how you can actually get the best performance overall for everything that you're running on Azure. And then to also get like some of the additional like recommendations. For example, you might want to do also like file storage test. You might want to also do like dependency test of your web config files, and also some of the other codes that you wanted to like do the options to change. And then finally to do like some configuration and also some logging. So it provides you with like a very, very clear steps of like the initial steps of what we have mentioned, right? You assess your application, you've been prompted with the specific line of code and also the content that you wanted to change. The Copilot generates the specific code for you, and also to sort of go in and go figure out like what is the right change, what is the right thing, and what are the templatized kind of things that you can use to change that specific line of code. And then finally, you can use this to generate your test case and also some of your like specific testing then before you actually move onto Azure. So it provides all of these useful steps for you to actually consider, and also what are the things that's right there. And also, you can also say how much for the whole migration project would typically be, and it'll just give you an estimate of like how much of those like resourcing that you might want to plan in, so that it gives you the end to end to basically look at, okay, application assessment and the whole thing that might take like 1 or 2 days of reviewing everything. Database migration takes a little bit more to check on everything. And then you might want to do the configuration updates. You might want to then deploy to Azure App Service, and then finally doing the run and testing and the validation, and then also post testing what's going to do. And then the total estimation is based on this. And of course, it does take some of your specific application into context, so that the contextual understanding helps you really sort of give a more accurate and also more like closer to your reality kind of a situation to really estimate. But remember, it is still an estimate. It really is still based on how much of the capabilities that your team and also your people are capable of doing, and also how much of the work that is right there. So that is pretty much everything that's right there. And there's all these features that's already in GA that you can use it right away, and you can then change it to anything that could actually help you mitigate all of those issues. Now, let me switch back to the deck that I have to tell you a little bit more about like what's coming next and also what are the things that's right there. So, like I mentioned, the application and code assessment tools is the first step, right? Like basically for your modernization work, this is merely the first step to really look at what are the projects that you're having, what's the legacy application, what are the kind of the connection strings, what are the specific, environmental resourcing files, what are the kind of specific informational files, and even the configuration files that you need to really do something about, and then to really mitigate, to make it work on Azure, and also to make it smoothly to get started. So that's the first step. We also have like things around like enterprise app patterns, or like the specific, contextual understanding of GitHub that's already right there for you to really get everything going, so that you have all these different capabilities to really look at your source code, look at what's the dependencies, what are the kind of the things that you need to like optimize before you actually move to Azure. Then you are on Azure. You have all these different tools, right? Like you have the app service migration assistant, you have all the different migration capabilities. You can also just deploy directly to Azure, where there's also an option on Visual Studio that you can just do that right away. And then you can leverage all the capabilities on Azure platform that help you mitigate all those operational complexities, and also mitigates all of those issues afterwards, where there is the new capability that we announced back in Ignite of the code optimization that actually helps you to optimize your code, and also to look at any performance issues or any other dependencies and other difficulties that you haven't caught on. So that actually helps you a step further to basically extend, once you're running already on Azure, to capture, hey, these things might be already using too much of your GPU or too much of your CPU or too much of your memory. You might want to change them in the code so that you can run more smoothly. And once that's on Azure, that's also a AI assisted experience where you can get that code optimization directly applied to anything that's running on app service, on container apps. And we're expanding that also to cover like more services afterwards as well. Finally, when you're on Azure, you can connect that with any kind of AI capabilities like AI monitoring, security, or even the resiliency capabilities that's right there to enable your application to be ready there. So to sum up, this is just the first step that we were just talking about. And that will help you sort of dive deep into your source code, understanding what's really going well, what's not going well, and how to get everything going in there to really, mitigate those issues. We also have, the tool ready for Java, and we also have it in different flavors. The one that I just show you is Visual Studio, but you also have the ability to use CLI to basically, look at multiple different projects at once, and then you can use the CLI commands and connect that with your scripts that you wrote to scan multiple different things as you wish. And then you also have the app service migration assistant, just like what I mentioned, aka.ms/ASMA. And of course, the tool that we've mentioned today, aka.ms/AppCAT. So that is kind of like the main thing that we definitely want you to try if you haven't. If you have, then there is actually one more thing that we wanted to introduce. So everything that we mentioned to you, right? There's still like a lot of the manual steps that's involved. There's a lot of the kind of assessment you wanted to run. There's a lot of the things that you have to do it on your own. Then you trigger the Copilot Chat to then help you on the side to basically mitigate those issues, right? Like generate those codes or find what are the files that needs to be actually updated, or what are the things that you need to then generate. That's not enough. We know, and we heard a lot of those customers telling us, hey, what else could you guys do? So we want to actually hear more about what we could do better to actually help you with. And there's also a sign up for the new AI assisted experience, which it's more than what we have just shown you. What we have just shown you is everything that's ready today. You can use it right away. But there's also additional cool stuff that we wanted to actually make it easy or make it simpler for you. For example, if you wanted to change some messaging queues, right? Like there's a lot of the MSMQ or a lot of the stuff that you might want to change to something else, to a Azure service specifically. How do I do that? How do I actually get started? How do I actually get everything going? Like there is a lot of those that's difficult, and also that requires a lot of the time and also a lot of the efforts. So you might want to also do something about them. So we're introducing that to you with this specific experience as the limited private preview sign up. You can also reach out to me if you like to for additional information that we're developing. And we definitely wanted to hear more about, your experience, how you were feeling about the end-to-end views of like your application, and also how everything is running, and also how your experience is towards like running AppCAT. So going back to AppCAT, you also have a specific way that you can also leave the feedback for us, is the leave feedback button, where you can give us the feedback of your, how everything that's right there, reporting a specific issue that is right there, or if there's anything that's running good or bad, and telling us how we're doing towards like the project that we are having. And with that, that's pretty much everything that you can do with just a very simple, like right click, replatform to Azure, run a report, and select a destination, and then get everything going. That's how easy it is. And you can select, anything. Okay. That concludes the session that I have today.